asking is people who don't, they should be allowed to opt out. So in Chile, they had Social Security, which, by the way, was just as bad as the American system. They realized people weren't going to get their money, and they said, okay, we're going to give people the following choice. You can stay in the government system, or you can opt out of the government system. And in a short period of time, and I'm not a historian, but happened something like this, everyone opted out. They said, okay, thanks, but no thanks. So I would say we should allow people to do that with the current Social Security system. It's a Ponzi scheme, allow people to opt out. The same thing goes for security. There are neighborhoods that have their gated communities, and they have their own security guards, and especially modern construction, modern development, it's more likely that companies build them with homeowners associations. So we can start seeing these transitions. Right now, for example, in San Francisco, there is a group called the San Francisco Patrol Special Police. They've actually been around since the days of the gold rush, and they provide private security, private policing. There was a movie, did anyone see Cops with Christian Slater and Mila Jovovich? This is about private police. Ridiculous movie, but nevertheless about private police. And this group is hired by merchants and neighborhood groups. People, if they want more security, they can hire this group than just relying on the government. So this is kind of like a hybrid system. I could imagine very easily transitioning from something where, okay, if you want to deal with long waiting times, go with the government police. Or if you want to deal with private security, you should be allowed to do that. In San Francisco, I conducted a survey and did a poll of their customers. Why don't you just simply rely on the government police? And the responses were great. Everyone said, this is a joke, right? What do they ever do to help me? So you call them up. A lot of the merchants will have, like, say somebody in their store who's on drugs or something. They want that person escorted out. If you call the police in San Francisco, they say, well, we'll get to that later. Right? Whereas this is very important for a business to make sure the store is in order. So allowing people to have this other system in the same way that today we can rely on the post office, or we can rely on Federal Express. So my moderate compromise solution, by the way, don't tell Walter I said this, would be to allow people to opt out. And I think the more and more people are allowed to do this, the more and more people would like it. Now in San Francisco, we've got this example of private security. Other cities we don't. And even in San Francisco, they're being constantly harassed by the government police because the government police view them as a competitor and a threat. And so the more people hire these private security guards, or police, I should say, private police, the less the government people have to work overtime. So here's a clear case of government not wanting it to happen simply because it's good for the government to have monopoly, but it's not good for the customer. Yeah?
Just as a reference, in New Orleans we have NOPP, New Orleans Private Police.
Oh, great.
And I've heard numbers from people like Gil Guillory or something, that they had, over Katrina, like 100% of their employees stayed in the city, versus the like less than half of New Orleans Police Department that ended up running.
Oh, great.
So, like, it's here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I will look forward to learning more about that. Thank you. Yeah.
Under a private system of law, how would we protect against the great evils and sins of drug addiction, prostitution, and loan sharking and gambling?
I think one of the great things about private law enforcement and private security is it is customer driven. And so people will be able to choose whatever sets of rules that they want. So there's plenty of private colleges that think drinking is a sin, drinking is wrong, and the customer can opt into those colleges where they say no drinking in this college. There's even colleges that say you can't even drink when you're off campus. That's the rule that you've signed. And so people who like those rules can opt into those rules. People who don't like those rules, my research has shown, as reported on CNN and CNBC and hundreds of other papers, I had an article found that drinkers actually earn more money than non-drinkers, 10 to 14% more than an otherwise similar non-drinker. So for those of you concerned about earning more money, you can opt into a different system, and it's completely up to the customer. It's similar with a restaurant and the smoking policy. Rather than having a one-size-fits-all policy, you can have an anti-smoking bar and a pro-smoking bar, allowing people to opt into the system that they want. So any of those questions that you answered, I think, can be done on an individual basis. Yeah?
I make my econometric students read your paper on social drinking.
Excellent. I am glad your students are so smart. Any other questions, discussions, points, counterpoints, jokes?
I got a question.
Yeah.
So how is government police crowding out private police?
Well, at the most basic level, whenever government taxes somebody to fund something, you are now paying for a service, whether you like it or not, and you have less money then to spend on all other private goods. So think about your real estate taxes or your parents' real estate taxes, which can be thousands of dollars per year. The government is now hiring police with your real estate taxes. You might have spent nothing on that. You might have spent all of it on private police. In many cases, you still see people spending additional money on private security, but that's at the basic level. Whenever things are done on a one-size-fits-all funding level, you'll probably see a bit of crowding out. At a more fundamental level, there's a lot of restrictions, legal restrictions. So in San Francisco, for example, every year the government is proposing new laws to make it more difficult for the private police to operate. So their latest law is they're going to force them to wear light blue uniforms, which is kind of unmanly and uncoppish. So things like that, little things like that, and these are quotes from the paper, but things like that prevent the private police from doing what they want. The other main thing in San Francisco is the government is now has to approve anytime these private companies hire more employees. So imagine giving General Motors the authority to decide whether Toyota hires any additional people. And in San Francisco, the private police have been extremely restricted in doing so. As a result, they've gone from a couple hundred to a couple dozen within the past 20 or so years. So here's an example of people hiring people privately. Government then said, oh, these are lucrative contracts. Maybe we can compete. And so what they've been doing is they've been sending in their overtime officers and saying, don't hire those private people, hire us. And they're basically being subsidized partially through tax money, and the result is pushing out this private alternative. So that's just one way I could talk about some other examples, but there's many cases. Yes?
What about concerns over like Blackwater, PMCs? They get hired out. A lot of people equate private police forces with those organizations.
Yeah, this is an interesting example when government hires entities